Should we make abortion a crime? Should we push for equal protection? Is the GOP still pro-life? Are heartbeat bills even good? We're going to answer all these questions. Ever since Roe got overturned, there's been a battle between a group called abolitionists and the pro-life movement or pro-life establishment. And this fight is hitting a boiling point. AJ Hurley and Jason Storms with the White Rose Resistance join me to talk about the dynamics of the movement and how it affects laws being put before our government. We also dive into whether the pro-life laws in states like Texas, okay, and Florida and North Dakota and South Carolina and all these states, Oklahoma, are even functional. And we dig deep into the abortion pill epidemic. Many of you have asked for this conversation, so here it is. But give us a rating and review, hit 5 stars on iTunes, leave a little review, let us know what you think. Join us at the White Rose Resistance by going to thewhiterose.life. Join us as an ally at $35 a month. Get your battle box in the mail. Join us on our White Rose app where there's curriculum courses, live calls, training, or $70 a month at Air Support, and you join our book club. We read books together. We talk about them live on Zoom every 6 or 8 weeks. Hang out with me and other people around the world. We have a good time. We need your help as we're rebuilding Christian resistance and getting the church out of the pews and into the public square to actually do the church Christian work historically we've been called to protect babies and children. Buckle up. This is the Seth Gruber Show. Oh my gosh, some of my most handsomest, best looking, compromising, apathetic jerks in the movement who just love to keep abortion legal because you love to keep your job. Just a bunch of, so anyways, this is what I hear, guys. I've been hearing that sort of stuff about myself for 8 or 9 years or something like that, maybe more now. I can't quite remember. And what we're talking about is, how do you abolish abortion? What's the most effective way? And since Roe got overturned, this whole conversation has gotten, am I right, like more intense, more energetic, and more frequent than perhaps ever before. It's weird, guys, at White Rose Resistance with y'all, because we're too radical for the pro-life establishment because we support equal rights protections, which we're going to define in a second here. But then on the other side, the immediatism, I think is what it's called. We're like pariahs and compromisers. Someone just told me on Twitter 2 days ago, guys, that I'm a pharisaical, good-for-nothing coward who doesn't want to end abortion because I need to keep my career path. And I was like, wow. So in a post-Roe v. Wade moment, AJ and Jason, my brothers, defined for us this debate and this argument. And then maybe in the next hour, we can get some clarity on what is good, what is true, what is right, what is godly, what is effective, because we want the people listening to this and the people in the church who care about the unborn to join us in the most effective way to ban abortion at the state level. Help us out here, guys.
Well. This is going to be insider baseball, I think, for some of you. It's going to be a completely new topic for others. Some of you are just going to know exactly what we're talking about and are waiting at the edge of your seat with bated breath as to what Seth and I are going to say in reference to all this. So first of all, I kind of want to define what's going to happen here, maybe give a quick outline. What I hope to accomplish, one, is to tell everybody where Seth and I, or the White Rose in general, are at in terms of equal protection, the rights for all human beings, including those in the womb. Define what immediatism is, or abolitionism. Define what incrementalism is, and then kind of give a biblical defense of where the White Rose resistance is moving forward. So okay. I don't know exactly where you want us to start, but So this
well,
concept,
firstly,
go ahead.
AJ and Jason, since you guys have been in the activist side of the fight for life for a long time, you've linked shoulders with a lot of good men and women, and some maybe not so nice men and women, but a common belief in the more activist side of the fight for the unborn is now been called abolitionism.
Yep.
And I've been familiar with it for a long time, but you guys have actually run with more of those people, like in ministry, like outside of abortion centers, like praise God, right?
Yep,
like,
totally.
I mean, I'm so grateful for any ministry that's outside of a killing center trying to plead with moms to choose life. Okay. But you two gentlemen have maybe run with in ministry people who may define themselves as abolitionists, and they actually reject the label or the title pro-life. They actually say that we shouldn't use that word. We don't need to get into that. But for people listening, I think most people now are aware of abolitionists. And then and people will say, are you pro-life or are you an abolitionist? Right? They'll ask you that. So why don't you describe the maybe the breakdown or the difference?
Sure.
And what's an abolitionist?
Yep.
Is it just immediatism?
Yeah.
And maybe define some terms for people who are newer to the conversation.
Very good. Very good. So, okay, on the one side, I'll say on this side is the pro-life establishment who believe in kind of this incrementalism, basically saying anything that pushes, anything that advances the cause, no matter if it's compromise, no matter if it delays or ends abortion by 1,000,000 cuts, 1,000 cuts, it's legitimate. Even if these laws that we're passing don't really even do anything, at least we're doing something, right? So I call those people like pro-life establishment types. People that have made a career out of this are in very big kind of cozy relationships with the GOP and establishment rhinos, plinos, pro-life people in name only, people that are kind of not trying to really push the cultural.
Did you say plinos?
Plinos, the plinos, yeah.
Pro-life in name
pro-life in name only. Let's popularize it.
Jason, can you give us an example of what AJ just said? What's an example? You can name an organization or you cannot name an organization. That's really up to you. Can you give us one or two examples of how perhaps pro-life establishment groups have done things historically that make normal Christian pro-life people go, why would you do that? I thought that your goal was to end abortion. Because I think people hear these claims, AJ, that you're making right now.
Totally.
But I want to bring some clarity and some examples around this.
Let me just quickly, if I could, just lay a quick foundational framework. So those people on the one side are the establishment people. On the far other end of the side are these kind of abolitionists or immediatists, go by many different names, and they won't take anything other than basically equal protection. Then if it's all the way, or just as a rough description, all the way or not any. So where one side says we'll take anything we can get, even if it doesn't really do anything.
Chip away.
Yes, chip away at it, even if it's completely useless for all intents and purposes. And then the other side is this kind of all or nothing approach to where if it doesn't criminalize abortion as murder, even in a state that's super liberal like New York, they won't do anything unless it's all kit and caboodle. Let's end abortion by giving the same rights and protections to born children have as unborn children have, or vice versa. So that's the general framework. And then, so it's like the question now is, what do we do with this? What are the biblical standards and just good sense, common sense approaches as to how we can involve ourselves in this process of social reform. And, because on one side, we want equal protection. Every single human being that's in this movement should want the same rights that we say unborn children have ontologically to flow into law in terms of their protections. So, but the question is, how do we get there? And so what is the solution between hardline abolitionism and this kind of cult-like behavior we're seeing in some of the groups.
Yeah.
And the opposite side, which is really establishment pro-life groups that are actually actively trying to prevent the abolition of abortion on the other.
Guys, what if I told you there's a line being drawn right now between those who bow and those who stand? That's why I want to personally invite you to The Last Stand. This is a one-day Christian festival for the remnant, okay? For those who won't compromise on truth, for families and believers who know we're not here to go with the flow. We're here to push back. Join me on June 21st in Southern California alongside some of the boldest voices in America. Pastor Jack Hibbs, Riley Gaines, Pastor John Amanchukwu, the book banning pastor, David Harris Jr., Alex Clark, and so many more. We're going to be worshiping with 10th Avenue North, Influence Worship, and more, because this is more than an event. It's a declaration. It's a stand. This is where warriors gather, where truth is spoken without apology. So go to thelaststand.com, June 21st, 2025, thelaststand.com, and get your tickets today and use code SETH10, SETH10 for 10% off your tickets. We'll see you at The Last Stand. So, Jason, I think it's fair to say that our team at the White Rose Resistance kind of rejects the hard line activists or individuals on either side. We're definitely not down with pro-life establishment groups that like sometimes actually work hard to prevent laws that would ban abortion.
Yeah.
But then I think the three of us we're not really down with some of the hardcore immediatists who have created a reputation of kind of being slanderers and liars, jerks, and maybe even sometimes saying any incremental victory, even if we might say that's a good incremental victory, is bad and sinful and needs to be repented of. So I'm kind of like not chill with either of these pendulum swings, but I want to also be fair, Jason, and I want to talk about the problems on each side. Okay, and if there are problems on each side, what would be a biblical, courageous, and correct approach? So let's start with pro-life establishment groups, Jason. I see a lot of comments on this channel, on this show on YouTube, that bring up this conversation a lot, and I've had a lot of requests to like dive deep into this conversation. So, Jason, how big of a problem is it on pro-life organizations preventing abolition bills or bans on abortion? Has this gone back a really long ways, or is it just since Dobbs? Can you kind of chart the course for us?
Yeah, I think a good jumping off point there is recognizing really the spiritual condition of our country, right? And all these things are flowing downstream from the reality that we are an apostate nation, despite many of the good things that we're seeing in our country and the recent election and other things. And we see a lot of awakening happen since especially 2020. I mean, we're a nation under God's judgment. You know, we have murdered 70 million babies. We celebrate our sin in the public square. We are the largest producer of pornography and consumer pornography and hardcore drugs, and violence and perversion and decadence just fill the land. And the church is largely asleep at the wheel. And so, what we find with the pro-life movement is really an extension of a watered down church. And so the pro-life movement, by and large, has abandoned the courageous, principled backbone that I think a lot of early pro-lifers had, that we saw in the rescue movement, that we saw, when Christians like Francis Schaeffer, for example, so prophetically called the church to righteous action and to engage on this biblically and to think rightly about it. And he woke up so many Christians, and called them to stand courageously in the public square and to think biblically on this. The pro-life movement, sadly, has in many ways abandoned the theological foundations of Christianity, and as a result, they're fighting sort of from an emasculated state. And so, if you go to state legislators or go to Washington D.C., it is incredible the perception of the pro-life political lobby amongst those who are active in politics across the spectrum, from liberal to conservative groups, who are active in politics, the pro-life political lobby is viewed as one of the most easily manipulated, easily pacified, least principled movements, just not taken seriously. So we groaned under Roe versus Wade for 50 years. And you would look at that era and you really could not point to one significant victory in terms of policy for preborn children. Our one big achievement was we banned partial birth abortion. That was one of the greatest achievements of that 50-year era. And what did that do? I don't think that stopped a single abortion.
No.
It prevented one of many late-term abortion procedures, right?
In
addition to that,
in theory.
Yeah, in addition to that, a lot of the accomplishments of the pro-life movement were, and again, I think a lot of these folks were very well-intentioned. And I think this is important. A lot of the abolitionist movement, I think, has been very harsh and overly critical, in many ways been an overreaction to this compromise. But things like 24-hour notification periods, or improved sanitation laws. So what the pro-life movement sort of did, groaning under Roe versus Wade, was we regulated abortion, further sanitizing abortion, further entrenching it into the fabric of our society. We're essentially making it safer and more clean and more publicly acceptable, rather than what we should have been doing is standing courageously against it and demanding that the pro-life leaders we elected in over half of our countries stood defiantly against the unjust, iniquitous Roe opinion. We could have seen 30 states or more defy Roe 20 or 30 years ago, much as the radical left did with gay marriage, right?
Wow.
You had Massachusetts take the lead and say, we're simply not going to recognize the federal DOMA laws. And 13 states followed suits. Before Obergefell, you had 13 states that legalized.
Jason, hold on. This is profound. Okay, so for the listeners, I want you to keep talking, Jason. But I was told by a lot of people in the pro-life fight, good men, okay, Jason, good men, in, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years before Roe v. Wade got overturned, that they believed in equal protections. They believed that ideally, what we should have is a federal ban on abortion, and that would include parents who take their kids to be killed against the law. Like everyone could be criminalized who plays party to the killing of an unborn baby if it's against the law. But the wisdom of the age in that era, Jason, was, if one or two states do that, it's going to be open civil war. And so we have to overturn Roe. That's the thing we need to do. But what you're saying is the left was quicker, happier, and more energetic to flout federal law when it came to the gay stuff than conservatives or Christians were to flout a federal law. And really what we mean by that is legislating from the bench, Roe v. Wade. I mean, we could be saying, well, actually, we're standing on the 14th Amendment. right. So wait, talk more about that. Are you saying that perhaps the strategy from the beginning should have been, in those early years of the rescue movement, when America was more conservative, to mobilize a 10, 15, 20, 25 state unified front, all saying we're going to defy Roe and we're going to ban abortion in our states? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. We had, take for example, the Bush era. We had all three branches of the federal government were pro-life in over 30 of our states. The same was true in 2016 when Trump was elected. We had 32 states that had pro-life majorities in all state government, and we had pro-life majorities, of course, in D.C. And what happened? Just as many babies died under pro-life supermajorities as died under Democrats.
Wow.
And so, I'm here in Florida. We moved to Florida a few months ago, as you guys know. And, we celebrate Ron DeSantis, what a champion he was during COVID, because he defied these tyrannical mandates by the federal government saying you had better vaccinate your kids, or you had better put masks on your kids and make them sit through 8 hours a day with a face diaper on at 5, 6, 7 years old. And DeSantis said, no, not here in Florida.
Right.
Go somewhere else with that tyrannical nonsense. And we applauded him, and people flooded into the state. And yet for 40 years, we did not have one courageous governor that was willing to do that over the murder of children. We have pro-life governors that we elected all over this country. And what did they do? They hid under the skirt of Roe versus Wade.
It's a good point, Jason.
When Roe was finally overturned, we were not surprised to discover that there was not the will amongst most of our elected pro-life politicians to actually criminalize abortion and establish full equal protection for preborn children.
This,
and so we talked about. Go ahead, AJ.
No, I was just going to say this notion that we couldn't do that. It's going to cause civil war. It's going to cause a huge uprising. It's not the will of the people. Is just really a mask for the cowardice of the GOP and the pro-life establishment. Because think about the left. The left doesn't play by these rules. They what was it? Almost some polls showed like 70% of the country was completely against gay marriage when the Supreme Court handed down the Obergefell decision, foisting gay marriage on every one of the states. Other examples, the left does this when it comes to sanctuary cities or states at the border, right? We're going to declare ourselves sanctuary, or marijuana laws. They'll do it for marijuana. Right? There's like places like California and Colorado.
That's a good point, AJ.
Completely standing on the rights of these, the will of the people in these states to smoke as much dope and bring as much illegal immigrants off from our southern borders as possible, but they won't stand for it when we're killing human beings.
So AJ, what's been one of those like conservative tropes or talking points that's been very popular, particularly in libertarian circles, but I think also in sort of neoconservatives is this idea. I've been hearing it for years. Maybe this resonates with you guys. It's like, but AJ, if we wield too much political power when we have it, and exercise our political will with like a lot of gusto and like unapologetic energy, then when the left gets power next time, they're going to wield power to maybe like an unrealistic extent. And so we'll just like restrain ourselves so that when the left gets power, they'll restrain. Oh, wait, that's right. They never restrain themselves when the left gets power. What are you talking about?
Perfect example of that is what's happening right now in Colorado. How many of the Colorado constituents, virtually all of them, I can guarantee you, by mass generalities, are completely against taking away the parental rights of children, not to their parents protecting them
an episode on this.
from dead naming them and protecting them against the mass complete propaganda machine and huge power of the arm of the state to take your kids away if you don't affirm their gender delusion. So I'm sorry, this excuse is just absolutely null and void, and it's ridiculous. It's just a smokescreen for the cowardice and weakness of an effeminate church and an effeminate GOP, frankly, an effeminate pro-life establishment that has largely been run by I hate to say it, but females, and who have a full look. Women are made to be nurturers. They're made to be absolute protectors. But when it comes to these things, they're always going to overwhelmingly kind of lean to the side of compassion, which is a good thing, but it could be very toxic empathy in reference to policy. And we're seeing that with the absolute inability to protect children against their mothers who want to willfully kill them in the womb.
So we're laying the groundwork here really well, gentlemen. I want to get more into specifics in just 1 second. But Jason, I just remembered something. So there's this guy, I'm going to name some names now. There's this guy named John Speed. And he might be one of the like most unrelenting trolls and just mean kind of guy to good brothers in Christ who want to abolish abortion. He once said on Facebook that I'm a pro-life pimp. Who goes on pimping tours to speak in pulpits, and any church that has me is a pimp as well. I was like, well, that's an interesting take. But Jason, he said something one time on social media years ago and I was like, amen, brother. And he said something like, do we care as much about our babies as our guns? And he was referencing, if the federal government were to tell states that they were coming for the guns, right? Yep. Like we're gonna, what did Beto O'Rourke say? Heck yeah, we'll take your AR-15s. Yeah. Like, Jason, how do you think, okay, this is for you, Jason, how do you think Republican politicians would react in, let's say, Oklahoma or Tennessee or Texas, if a Democrat, controlling all three branches of government said, we're coming for your guns and your semis, how do you think they'd respond, Jason? And then compare that to our passion for the unborn.
Yeah, well, we see it all around us. The Republicans are terrified of the gun lobby. They're terrified of gun organizations because gun guys have backbone. They will stand and fight for their principles, whereas pro-lifers get pushed around. We get easily manipulated, easily pacified, and many pro-life organizations, quite frankly, are bribed by Republican leadership. Republicans flaunt big donors their direction and say, "Hey, if you help us out, we're in a tight spot. We can't do anything. Our hands are tied in the legislature. You guys got to do the work in the culture first, right?" And that is a complete passing of the buck, right? No, we elected you to do your duty, which is to protect life, to stand upon principle, to defend the Constitution and the constitutional rights of people, and they fail to do it, and we allow them to do it, so we give them a pass, right? So I'm a big Second Amendment guy. I love my guns and I love my babies. I have 11 children, and I even love my babies' guns because I bought guns for many of my kids, and they all learn how to shoot. So to John Speed's point, and John Speed's a friend of mine. I love John. I think that he, the Bible says, bad company corrupts good morals, and I think he gets around some people that are negative influences on him who have a bit of a self-righteous spirit, and that's a problem in the abolitionist movement. So circling back to the abolitionist movement, right? The abolitionist movement rose up as this movement to push back against these failures, these compromises of the pro-life, really the pro-life political industry. And we see it. We see the failure. We see the cowardice. We see the lack of biblical thinking. We see the muddy-headedness. We see them getting pushed to the ground by the Republican leadership. And then you know what they do while they're on their back? They just got ran over. Then they host fundraisers and say, "We're winning. Life is winning." No, babies are being murdered by the millions, and you're out here fundraising off of getting trampled by the political establishment. Yeah. It's really a sad and tragic thing. But, so the abolitionist movement emerged, and I was a supporter of the abolitionist movement, and I would say, really, I am an abolitionist. I don't back away from that term, but I want to be able to define it. I also consider myself pro-life. I've often said I'm a pro-life abolitionist, and of course that upsets both sides. The pro-lifers say you can't be an abolitionist, and the abolitionists say you can't be pro-life. I'm like, well, guess what? I'm both, and I get to define those terms, right? And so we don't abandon terms, and I don't let other people foist terms on me and tell me what the terms I'm using, how I have to define them.
Sure.
Pro-life in its most general sense simply means that we're for life. And of course we're pro-life. Of course Christians are pro-life. But when we're talking about the failure of a pro-life industry, we need to separate. We need to come out from that. We need to expose that, because that is enabling the murder of millions of babies. And so to the abolitionist movement's credit, they've been exposing that that really, cartel that exists really between pro-life leadership, where the real power is, and in the political.
So I want to get into that more. And then after that, AJ, I want to get into biblical defense of approach, and there's a lot I want AJ to talk to. But gentlemen, to whoever of you wants to respond to this, I want people to understand what's going on in the country, in the culture, and in the fight for life. The biggest question I get right now, if I'm interviewed by someone on a show, is what does the post Roe v. Wade, post Dobbs political landscape look like, and how has the fight for life changed? I mean, it's what everyone's asking. So this conversation, I think, really needed to happen. I think it's really important. One of the things that I'll use the term that they like, the abolitionists. One of the things that they've been saying for years is abortion is only legal because of the pro-life establishment. Or they'll say the pro-life establishment is keeping abortion legal. And for people who aren't in the movement regularly, I think the lay Christian hears that and goes, huh? Right? Because they just associate the pro-life movement with the group that exists to abolish abortion. And so for those who don't understand some of what happens politically on a national or state level scale, I think that a lot of good brothers and sisters in Christ walk away glassy-eyed, eyes glazed over when the abolitionists say that, because what are you talking about? So we're here to end abortion at the White Rose Resistance, to wake up the church to do its job. And we're not afraid to have this conversation. So guys, how bad is it? How often does this happen? Can you give me any examples of how
let me jump in for 1 second.
pro-life
AJ,
groups are working to not ban abortion? Jason?
Let me jump in and say one quick thing, then turn over to AJ is you know, the what should be just a jarring fact that should just cause every pro-life Christian who cares deeply about this issue to pause is this one simple fact. In every single state in this country right now, it is legal for a mother to kill her own child. Just think about that. Thousands of babies are dying in our most deeply pro-life states: Alabama, Texas, Kentucky, Oklahoma. It is legal in every single one of those states for a mother to kill her own child. And so that should wake up every serious-minded, well-intentioned pro-life Christian to say something is wrong here.
Yep. Jason, I agree with you, but for the person listening who's going to Google this and maybe they're still learning some of the how to navigate some of these waters, let me play devil's advocate for a second, Jason. Okay, Jason, what are you talking about? I just Googled Oklahoma abortion law. It says abortion is banned, and the only exceptions are if the mother is going to die or with an ectopic pregnancy. So fact check false, Jason, you're lying. This says that it's illegal in Oklahoma.
Yeah, so 14 states have trigger bans that came into effect. They were written before that ban abortion. Every single one of them, there are explicit immunity clauses, wholesale, total immunity clauses for the aborting mother. Mm-hmm. That is to say, the mother under no circumstances can be prosecuted for an abortion. And that is written into these laws, written into the homicide statutes by pro-life lawyers, supported by pro-life organizations, at the behest, of course, of politicians. And so this is a major blind spot, or really, you could say a theological error, but it's a major problem in the pro-life movement that we have been claiming that women are victims for 50 years. And now in many ways, they certainly are. I mean, women are being lied to. You could really say anybody growing up in this barbaric culture where we have all been propagandized from the youngest of ages by some of the most technologically sophisticated, marketing tools the world has ever seen. Any young kid has had thousands of hours of propaganda and programming run across his brain by the time he hits his teenage years.
Well, that's a good, that's a good point.
So, I mean, kids are victims, but this does not give them legal immunity from criminal behavior.
Right.
And so, the penalties that we have against laws are one, to deter bad behavior, secondly, to instruct the culture about the value of the victim and the horrific nature of the crime, and third then is punitive. So, it's not that we want to lock mothers in prison. The last thing that I want to do is put any woman in prison. We want to deter bad behavior, and we want to teach the culture, including mothers and fathers and all involved, that you shouldn't kill babies. We should actually love our children. We should man up and accept responsibility, right?
Amen.
And so, as
Jason, say that again. That's really helpful. What are the three purposes of law? Say that again.
Yeah, one is to deter from bad behavior, right? If I know, and I was an 18-year-old criminal breaking into houses and doing all kind of criminal stuff. When I turned 18, I remember thinking, man, I can go to the big house. I don't want to go to jail. I've been arrested a lot as a juvenile. They slap you in the wrist when you're a juvenile. Right. And then I remember when I turned 18, it's like, dang, I could go to the big house, man. And that made me pause. Like, I better be more careful about my criminality, right? And I got thankfully saved at 19. But at 18, I had a girlfriend that had an abortion. And there is no way we would have gotten the abortion had I known I could have faced criminal sanction. Wow. But it was so easy for her and I to kill our own child. And oddly enough, we both had pro-life sort of moral intuitions. We both were opposed to abortion. I remember having conversations and saying, we both had basically said, hey, if you get pregnant, you should take responsibility, accept the consequences of your actions.
Wow.
But it was so easy just to abandon our child.
Because it was
and
legal.
For her to take... go down to an abortion clinic and kill her child with complete immunity. And so the law functions as a deterrent, first and foremost. Right? We don't have laws that say it's illegal for a mother to kill her 1-year-old baby because we want to put moms in prison. We do that so that moms won't kill their babies. So the deterrent factor of the law. The second is the instructive or the teaching or the didactic function of the law. The law instructs. The law is a teacher. Right, we when we think about the law, we meditate on that. It tells us, it should tell us right from wrong in some ways. The law is not synonymous with morality, but it should be an outgrowth of of the moral foundations of a healthy society. So good laws are the fruit of a good, moral, upright society. That's why abortion was criminal through much of America's history. And so the law is a teacher. So when we tell moms, you're exempt and given wholesale immunity for killing your child, we're instructing them that the action they're engaging in maybe is not as severe as what it actually is. And so we're undermining our very
First
argument
principles.
that abortion is the killing of an innocent human being. And if it's, insofar it is the intentional killing of an innocent human life, it is murder. And it should be under our homicide statutes as such. And so as you've said so eloquently, Seth, so many times over the last several years, you and I, one of our first conversations, that the goal of the pro-life movement certainly should be, when we say we're pro-life, that we affirm that every human being from the moment of conception should be legally protected, and it should be criminal for anyone involved to kill that precious little baby.
Yep.
And that's not a testament about, whether we devalue moms or dads or anybody else, but it's really a statement about the value we place on the child.
On the baby.
That we believe that child has equal value. And that is what is at stake when we grant these wholesale immunity clauses. We're allowing thousands of babies to continue to be killed, and we're devaluing those children.
Let me just say real quick
pro-life.
as a follow-up to that point, I think one thing we're experiencing and the differences between the old guard and the new is really this paradigm change of 50 years ago, there wasn't a common understanding due to technological developments, due to just the culture at large, what was in the womb. And so the majority of the women that were having abortions perhaps really weren't, they were lied to, they were kind of coerced, they're very just coercive type of manipulative language from the abortion industry as to what was in the womb, just obfuscating and hiding. The argument used to be, if we could prove what's in the womb was human life, then we would win.
Right.
It is no longer that anymore. I can tell you with so much certainty. I mean, anyone who has conversations with people, college students, people on the street, everyone you're talking to no longer says it's not a human being. Right. The majority of the people that we just do you have 40 ultrasounds right now. When my mother, I have two brothers, twin boys that were 10 years older than me. My mom didn't know she had twins. She's like, oh, there's another one here, because they didn't have ultrasounds it wasn't normative practice in the 70s to give a woman an ultrasound to see what's in the womb. Right. And we're really dealing with this outdated perspective and paradigm as to what this issue is all about. Everyone admits it's a human being now. They just say that the mother's life is more important than the child's, and therefore it's a justified human killing upon the presuppositions that they might be a member of the human species, but they are not a valuable member of the human species. A couple points here real quick I just want to make. We point out in great detail all of the issues with the pro-life movement, but also realize that we're not saying that the pro-life movement hasn't done amazing things. Like, I can point to a few things, like right now, these 14 states, they are preventing the mass slaughter to extreme measures because of trigger laws that the pro-life movement worked hard to put into effect, right? And that the GOP is so desperately trying to remove, and these Supreme Courts in the states are trying to basically legislate out from the bench out of existence. And the Hyde Amendment, incredible. I mean, the Hyde Amendment has saved so many babies, not only here, but then also internationally. The Hyde Amendment, incredible win for the pro-life movement that's doing so much to actually restrain the evil of the bloodshed. We're just saying, like, look, right now, there's this horrible fact that no one in the pro-life movement seems to be recognizing, is that when you give immunity to one certain class of human beings based on their gender to willfully and legally take the life of their child, this is going to create massive incentive and loopholes for that to happen. And we're saying, oh no, when there's this facts coming out, like this facts just came out of Texas. The numbers on a chemical abortion, Seth, are overwhelming. Pro-life Texas, it's banned from conception, they tell us.
Okay.
All of the facts from the abortion industry, from the pill manufacturers themselves, are coming out and saying 25,000 abortions last year in Texas. Self-managed abortions. And no one, and I think this is the first time anyone has ever even mentioned this in the pro-life movement. Ready for it?
Okay.
If you're an OBGYN resident of Texas, if you perform a surgical abortion on yourself, don't ask me how that would be done, but if you were able to manage to perform a surgical abortion on yourself in the ninth month of pregnancy in Texas, film it and turn it over to the police, there would be zero consequences for your actions. Because if you're a mom and you willfully kill your baby, you suffer absolute zero penalties against that. And that is a problem that the pro-life establishment, pro-life groups do not want to recognize.
And that's true regardless of gestational age?
There is the reason why that is true is because in the law itself, it allows for an outright exception saying this law does not apply to moms who kill their babies. So if you put a law in the books from conception,
pro-life legislators put that language in.
Yes. Well, they explicitly in their legislation, they'll say we want to ban a chemical or abortion from conception, but they put an exception clause, and none of the above aforementioned legislation applies to the mom. So if you are a mother who happens to be an OBGYN and you're pregnant in the ninth month and you can kill your baby somehow via surgical abortion, you will suffer absolutely zero laws preventing you from doing it.
So, Jason, this is wild. So the abortion pill, RU486, is allowed up to 10 weeks recommended. I mean, you're not supposed to be able to even get it if you're past 10 weeks pregnant. So let's say Oklahoma and Texas, you're saying that any woman who learns she's pregnant in a state that has allegedly banned abortion can order the abortion pills online, have them shipped to her home in Texas, manage an abortion at home, flush the baby down the toilet, and that's legal.
That's legal. That's perfectly legal. Yeah, the only thing limiting a lot of abortions is the gestational capacities of the chemical pills. You think about the craziness of this. A female abortion doctor, of which there are many in many of these states,
yeah,
she could go to prison for aborting somebody else's baby, but she could perform an abortion on herself, and she's granted complete and total legal immunity because you have many who will say she's a victim who doesn't know what she's doing. So I think we can see the absurdity of that. Now,
that's wild.
Again, it's important to understand, the bills that we're advocating for. And we should probably point out the state, what is the position of the White Rose here, right? And what are we working on? Because we're working on some really cool stuff. And one of them is an equal protection statement that, many have signed. Seth, you've signed that, and we've submitted that to multiple state legislatures now with our equal protection bills, and are going to be doing more of that. So we are seeing more and more pro-life leaders realizing the problems here, the inconsistencies here, and saying, we have to eliminate this immunity clause. We have to hope, thousands of babies could be saved this year if in our most conservative pro-life states, we close up that immunity loophole, and we said, no, moms will be held accountable, as will fathers, everybody that's involved.
Everyone.
Right? Coercive dads, you're going to be very much held accountable.
No one's like,
Oh.
I want to throw women in jail. It's like, no. We're saying anyone who plays party to killing a baby. But before we get into our statement and maybe more of a biblical worldview, there's so much here, guys. I so appreciate you. I want to return to something you said, Jason. I think it's important because what has been the most popular line or form of argumentation that's been used by the old guard pro-life establishment as to why they don't support equal rights protections, or meaning anyone can be prosecuted for killing a baby against the law, what is the line? Women are the second victim. So I appreciate what you said earlier, Jason. It's because it has a lot of nuance to it. Yeah, everyone is sort of a victim to some extent from their culture, the ideologies that they were raised with, what their parents taught them, the cultural and political waters they swam in growing up, and how they formed their consciousness and their positions on what's okay and what's not okay. I mean, couldn't we also say that, like, a 19-year-old pedophile who's been watching pornography since he was 7 years old and who was raped by his uncle when he was 9, and now he's raping little boys and girls at 19, he's sort of a victim, isn't he? But that doesn't mean that the behaviors he's engaging in with little children should be allowed, and it certainly doesn't mean that he should not be prosecuted for engaging those kind of behaviors. Jason, more thoughts on that? Help us flesh this out for people who continue to say no woman should be punished for an illegal abortion because she's the second victim.
Yeah, I think, like I said, there's the paradigm is shifting here, like AJ said. And so I do want to also emphasize something that AJ said, that, many of the pro-lifers who believe this are good, godly people. I've engaged with many of them in great conversation. Many of them have been very faithful in the culture, right? Saving the lives of babies, changing hearts and minds, mobilizing churches, getting Christians out of their apathy, getting them involved and speaking up on this issue. So there's, the general statements we're making here is not an indictment of the entire pro-life movement by all. There are just millions of phenomenal pro-lifers out there who've been changing hearts and minds, and who've been getting beat up and persecuted, and who are ostracized in their churches where their pastors don't want to talk about it and want to shun them. So praise God for the faithful pro-life voices that have been in this fight for so many years. Yeah. But the arguments to justify this there's two categories. One are those who say that these women are victims, and they genuinely believe that. They genuinely believe these women just don't know. And there are certainly categories of women that's true of. There's you think of a 15-year-old girl who has been told by every authority figure in her life, her school counselors, her mom, her doctor, are all telling her, go get an abortion. Right. It's not a baby yet. It's not alive yet. There's nothing wrong with this. Yeah. You're early enough. This is the thing that, if every authority figure in her life is telling her that. And then what if her dad is telling her,
what if her dad's telling her, you're going to do this and I'm driving you to the abortion center?
Yeah, we're kicking you out of the house, or we're your house, So, so in our bills, these kinds of scenarios are taken into effect. This is how our legal system works to begin with, right? Okay. They will be granted tremendous mercy and leniency by the court. But that's not most abortions, right? Most abortions, as we've seen, and if you've been out in front of an abortion clinic, you see women that brag about what they're doing. I can kill my blankety blanket baby if I want to kill my blankety blanket baby. Nobody's gonna tell me nothing. So I think that's changing. Right. The more compelling argument that I think you hear people say, Kristen Hawkins I think made this argument recently, is, hey, we're going to get politically killed if we say that we're going to put women in jail. We're going to get politically killed. It's political suicide for us. And so I think this is really more, it's a pragmatic argument. They say, well, we can't go there yet, Jason. And people will tell me this privately. They're not really willing to say it publicly, but privately they'll say, Jason, of course eventually we're going to have to get to a place where we have to hold moms accountable. We're just not there yet culturally. And so what I tell them is, well, please tell me, one, how we're ever going to get there culturally if we keep reinforcing the lie and we keep telling moms they're victims. How are we ever going to change the culture unless we begin to say the truth and say, no, moms, you're murdering your child, and that's wrong. This baby's precious.
Jason, that's a really good point, because what you're saying is politics is downstream of culture, but culture is also downstream of politics. I just did an episode, Jason, on Saturday Night Live. Did you see the skit, gentlemen? Mocking gay people as baby thieves because it's a whole skit where all the people are like, well, where'd you get the baby? Jason, they went, I just did an episode of did you steal the baby? And they go, the gay guys in the SNL skit, well, we like to say that she stole us. And then the other couples are like, wait, so did you steal the baby? Like, guys, SNL just mocked gay couples as baby thieves. It's like, whoa. And so what explains that? The election of Donald Trump. Yeah. Okay? Yeah, 100%. If Kamala Harris was president, that skit wouldn't have happened. So I wanted to bolster what you just said, that actually culture is also downstream of politics. Right. It's a
Politics
two-way
is
street,
greed.
or it's a concentric circle. So say that again, because I don't want to like intentionally malign either group if there's good-hearted men and women on both sides, but I want to bring clarity. Okay. Your response to people who say it's political suicide, the culture isn't ready for that. Say that again but then how will we prepare the culture if, what were you saying?
If we don't speak the truth and stop saying the lie, if it is in fact true that women are not victims, that the victim is the baby that's being murdered, well, then we have to say that. We have to expose the lie. Otherwise, we're never going to change culture. Somebody has to be the courageous one to stand up in the room who's the courageous minority that says the thing that maybe others are thinking and are all afraid to say. Somebody has to be willing to stand up and say the hard thing, because that's how you change culture. That's how you shift the Overton window. If all we do is we go, well, and this is what Republican politicians have been doing for decades, is they say, well, what is the polling numbers? The polling numbers show that 55% are against us, so we can't do that. Say, well, have you ever considered that maybe if you were bold and persuasive and articulate, you could change public opinion, right? And so that's the beauty, as you just mentioned, is that Donald Trump has been changing public opinion. Donald Trump is accomplishing things that people said, you can't say that and win politically. Well, he just did it. Ron DeSantis down here in Florida.
Yeah.
He's winning battles that political pundits said you can't do that and win. Well, he's winning by larger landslide victories than what they even thought was attainable. And so what I think it shows is people are hungry on our side, particularly in the church, for bold, courageous voices, right? And you're getting so many churches open up to you, Seth, not because you're a pimp. You are handsome and you are articulate. No, but you're getting so many churches open up to you, right? I mean, I see some of the churches you speak at, man, in huge congregations, and you do not back down from saying strong biblical truth, man. I've been in some services where you spoke, man, and you blew the doors off the place. Anointed, powerful conviction, calling men and women to stand up and be faithful and bold representatives and ambassadors of Christ, and to confront the evils of our age. And so I think there is a real, and you get standing ovation, right? And people are saying, where do I sign up? How do I get involved?
Surprises me sometimes. I'm like, I can't believe I got away with saying that.
People are hungry for bold. Yeah, people are hungry for bold leadership.
Well, so, but that's your point, right? Is people are drawn to that. Right. And it can shift public opinion. I think that's such a great point. 100%. Jason, you told me something one time, and because I want more details. I want more proof. I want people to get clarity on this conversation of abolition versus incrementalism. And is there another option? I'm not usually a fan of third wayism because it smells too much like Russell Moore and Tim Keller. But maybe in this debate, there is supposed to be a different way. You told me something a few weeks ago, Jason. You said something like, since the overturning of Roe versus Wade, Republicans have gained seats in every red state, or something like that.
The states, every state that has a quote unquote ban on abortion.
Okay.
Right. So these trigger bans where they've written law, life of conception, they've shut down their abortion clinics, and so those are good things. Like I would much rather live in a state like Texas than live in California, right? Where it's legal up to 9 months. So Texas, they have shut the abortion clinics down. They've established life at conception in their laws. Those are good things. An abortion doctor can be prosecuted. Those are good things.
Right.
They just haven't gone far enough, right? And so in Texas, right, Republicans gain seats. In all these states where Republicans. And the only reason to really pass these bans, very few states have passed any kind of ban post Dobbs. These were all laws that were passed before Roe.
Right.
So there was no real skin in the game. Republicans probably thought, like me, I was a skeptic. I was like, dude, Roe's not going to get overturned anytime soon. I was shocked. So I think we were, in groups like us and others were putting pressure on these state legislators to defy Roe. And so many of them, they didn't want to defy Roe, but they didn't want to be outed as not really being truly pro-life. So they were passing these trigger bills.
Okay. And
so these trigger bills, establish life at conception, ban abortion. Of course, they have these immunity clauses for the mothers. So, so after Dobbs, these laws come into effect. Republicans, weren't thrown out of office. As the abortion clinics closed, abortion doctors, shut down and are run out of town. Republicans are gaining seats. And what are the Democrats? What did the Democrats run on in all these states? You remember, right after Dobbs, I know my state, I was living in Wisconsin at the time, and we had a law that came into effect from 1848. That came into effect. Abortion was outlawed for a whole year in Wisconsin. and Democrats and the liberals were like, we're going to have a night of rage. We're going to terrorize. If our clinics aren't safe, nobody's safe, and they were threatening to, and of course, Wisconsin, we have a saying for when they act up like that. It's called getting Rittenhoused. Start making threats and getting violent. But, we were actually patrolling the streets because of their threats of violence. They said they were going to do all this mayhem. And, instead what happened was about 300 overweight lesbians marched through downtown Milwaukee crying about their abortion clinics, and so, we won't go any further down that road, but there wasn't this mayhem. But the Democrats ran these aggressive political campaigns in Wisconsin saying, they made abortion their number one issue. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so it has really been an issue that they have driven hard. And so, what some Republicans are saying is, you see, this is proof that we can't win on abortion. We can't move this fast. We'll lose. If you're talking about criminalizing mothers and fathers, man, look at we can't even get a full ban. They're going to kill us. We're going to get destroyed. Right. Well, that's not what's been happening. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of bluster. The reason why I think the Democrats are spending so much time and money and energy on the issue of abortion is because that's the only issue that they see that there's a vulnerability because Republicans have done such a lousy job of defending it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As soon as the Dobbs decision came down, a lot of Republicans immediately tuck-tailed and ran the other direction as far as they could. Yeah. Democrats looked at all these issues. They see, we're going to lose illegal immigration. We're going to lose the trans stuff. We're going to lose the economy. We're going to lose inflation. Oh, but here's an undefended area of the wall. Republicans are not even trying to defend abortion.
Wow.
We can win. Let's attack here. And so they've been aggressively going after that. But we've been pushing back. And Ron DeSantis gave a great speech at the March for Life. Seth, you were there. AJ, you were there. Great speech, a little 8-minute speech, and encourage people to watch it, where he said, hey, we can win. Let's be aggressive. Why are we running away from this issue? Why are we backpedaling? Why are we talking about taking the life plank out of our platform? Man, let's march forward. We can win if we articulate this issue and we stand for life. Plus, this is what duty demands of us. This is what we're elected to do. Are we men or are we mouse here, right? Let's stand up and protect these babies, and let's make the arguments, and let's have the fight. But Republicans, like you said earlier, they run away. Many times it's like they don't even fight because they're terrified they're going to get punched. Well, let's not punch our opponent because he might punch us back.
But first, we'd like to thank our friends at Everylife Diaper Company, everylife.com. Everylife matters. We shouldn't be killing babies. And those who procreate the most tend to be conservative Christians. And yet, the people who procreate the most, unfortunately, for a long time, have been getting their diapers, their baby wipes, and their baby products at pro-abortion, anti-family diaper companies. I mean, it's insane. Like my friends, Michael and Sarah Gable Seifert, they found this out. They're like, almost every major diaper company supports abortion rhetorically or financially. And they decided that's ridiculous. We can't allow companies to sell products to a clientele base that they're helping to kill. What? Go to everylife.com to get your diapers, baby wipes, non-toxic shampoos and washes for those cute little butts. Tell the church, tell your nursery, right? Tell anyone having babies. If you're having babies, your grandkids are having babies. Go to everylife.com. Use promo code Seth10, Seth10 for 10% off your order. Make sure you put in Seth10 because you let them know that we sent you, and that's how you're supporting the Seth Gruber Show and us here at the White Rose Resistance. Get your baby goods at everylife.com. We love our sponsor, Everylife.
Before we move on, Seth, I wanted to know if I could just make one more point on the abortion pill. So there's this obvious loophole that is being propagated and capitalized on at the state level in these pro-life states. But the answer from a lot of the pro-life establishment people is like, okay, well, we need to just work on, rather than making abortion a crime, we should just work on closing these loopholes. Let's go after the abortion manufacturers of these pills. Let's get the FDA involved, all of that. The issue with that is twofold, right? One, people are shipping this via mail. Like you'd have to inspect people's mail. It'd be the enforcement mechanism would be very hard. The second thing is like, so much, hundreds of millions of these pills are coming from India, from places like Mexico, over a porous border.
Overseas.
And that even if that wasn't the case, do you think the abortion pill is the only way that women can kill their babies via chemical abortion? All you got to do is go on Reddit, and there will be recipe after recipe after recipe online of how to use herbs, how to use other medications, how to use various objects to
ancient practice.
Abortion has been happening for centuries of, there's 2,000-year-old chemical abortion recipes for how to induce a chemical abortion. These are going to happen nonetheless. The only thing that will prevent this and dissuade the majority of this behavior is if you make it a crime. And what is the didactic function of this? What's the didactic consequences of this type of behavior? If you are on one side of your mouth saying human babies are equally valuable and endowed by their creator with inalienable rights, such as the right to life, but on the other side of your mouth you're saying, no, you know what? There's a class of human beings that should just have legal impunity to take the life of these children. What is the cumulative effect of that on the culture over time, inculcating America in bloodshed?
Right.
So the last thing I want to say on this is in reference to, because I don't want to skip and kind of just mull over the point that, nobody wants to put women in jail, and that women are legitimately, some of them, coerced by sex traffickers, by abusive boyfriends and husbands, right?
Fathers.
Horrible, right? But a few things here, right? If you have a full-on culture where the underlying crime of an activity is not a crime, then that's
the underlying action.
Action of abortion, if it's not a crime, then it's going to create, even if you have laws against coercion on the books, it's going to create a culture where it's just not a big deal because we actually champion and celebrate that action such that you can kill your baby if you're a mom without legal impunity. So we're seeing this already. How many undercover videos have been exposed from places like Planned Parenthood where sex traffickers and pimps and abusive husbands and fathers and boyfriends are forcing their girlfriends or underage girlfriends even, right. And Planned Parenthood is covering I'm sorry, coercion is already a crime, right. But it's not being enforced because we refuse to make the underlying crime of abortion an actual crime. It is the only way to close this loophole, and it's all about not putting in. It's about protecting children.
Yeah. Well, that's how our friend Lila Rose got famous years ago. Right?
Absolutely.
She was posing undercover journalist as a minor.
Yep.
And captured on small little cameras with, I think it was with James O'Keefe at the time. Planned Parenthood basically saying, don't tell us her age, the guy posing as a pimp. He's like, I'm in sex work, and they completely covered for it. So what you're saying is that like abortion could be illegal on paper, but if killing the baby in the womb is not a crime at all times, in all places, and by all people, then the action itself is actually removed from criminal law.
Yeah.
And so explain to us how we ever end abortion here.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the problem, right? And listen to this. It is so true that at this juncture, with the current trajectory that the pro-life movement is on, we could reach all of our legislative ends, Seth, and still kill millions of babies in America.
Wow. Jason, AJ, I want to go back to the question. This has been super helpful, but how long has the pro-life establishment, big organizations, how often have they actually betrayed the cause of equal protection? Is this a big problem where pro-life organizations who fundraise off of saving the unborn and passing laws to protect them actually come out and oppose or try to stop bold Republican legislators who are trying to make abortion criminal? 100%. Is this a big problem, Jason?
Yeah, we were just in Georgia 2 weeks ago for a bill hearing for equal protection bill. We had a whole coalition, Georgia Right to Life, our friends at G3 Ministries.
Virgil.
Abortion Now. Yeah, Virgil and Josh, and we had a great coalition of groups from around the state of Georgia and around the country that all gathered. Of course, White Rose was represented as well, and standing in support of the Georgia Equal Protection Bill, which simply says treat preborn children just like we treat born children. That's it. And
that's it. Right.
We had 22 co-sponsors. So this is
Really?
the most progress we've made in any state. We have 22 co-sponsors there. And I think one of the reasons we've made so much tremendous progress in Georgia is because some of the more kooky style abolitionists, if you will, have not really been very much involved. It's been a lot more, I think, reasonable and principled folks who can build coalitions. And so, you guys have been a part of that, right? So, and so we've made tremendous progress, and it's been a beautiful thing to see 22 co-sponsors there in Georgia. And we had the statement, equal protection statement, we submitted to the legislature there of groups, like yourself and others who've signed on and said, yes, we support this. We have to have full equal protection. Georgia Life Alliance, who they're the National Right to Life affiliate. Georgia Right to Life is actually not associated with the National Right to Life. They broke off. They're a rogue organization.
I heard about that.
And so Georgia Right to Life is very solid, very principled. The president, Ricardo Davis, good friend of mine, awesome brother. He was there testifying for the bill, has done great work, working key legislative districts and grassroots mobilization.
Okay.
So Georgia Life Alliance is the National Right to Life affiliate. They just wrote a letter last week. So they were quiet. We thought they were not going to oppose us, which was going to be great because they've opposed us in the past. They just wrote a letter to the Georgia legislature denouncing our bill and urging the Georgia legislature not to pass our bill. Now think about this. Right now in Georgia, there's a heartbeat bill. That heartbeat bill enables many abortion clinics to stay open. There's, I think, 4 large abortion clinics in the city of Atlanta. We've been out in front of them. We were out in front of them 2 years ago with hundreds of Christians at our OSA event. So these clinics are open, killing babies legally every day.
Wow.
Who's protecting the abortion industry in Georgia? Pro-life supermajority in their legislature, pro-life Republican governor. So the pro-life governor and the pro-life supermajority in the legislature is actively protecting the abortion industry in Georgia right now, enabling the murdering of thousands of babies every year now in Georgia. And so groups like us, Georgia Right to Life, others said, please establish legal protection for these children. You ran on a pro-life platform. Protect these babies. Georgia Life Alliance denounced our bill and told them not to move it forward. They're content to have these clinics stay open.
That's wild.
Say, why would they do that? Why would they do that?
Because of this belief, apparently, that they're either going to lose elections or women are victims, so they're not morally culpable for killing babies, or both, apparently. Let me just say it again. Go ahead.
A third option that I think may be the cause, and I do think some of that is a factor, but you have this is a mistake of the abolitionist movement, is they say the problem is the pro-life movement. We got to destroy the pro-life movement. They literally say that. We have to destroy the pro-life movement. That's misguided thinking. The pro-life movement is not what's keeping abortion legal. It's really the Republican establishment who wear the label pro-life and get endorsements from pro-life organizations. What you have is the real money is with the with the Republican leadership. You look at the billions of dollars that flow through the state capitol in Georgia compared to significantly smaller numbers that go through the hands of these pro-life organizations. These pro-life organizations are low-level pawns for the GOP leaders who really are bought and paid for by special interest groups, and they essentially purchase pro-life organizations. They prop up pro-life organizations through funneling donor money to them. If those pro-life organizations will give them endorsements in return, protect them. And sometimes these pro-life groups are just naive. They don't even realize they're doing this. They think that they're being nice, they're being kind, they're developing relationships with these politicians, and these politicians are just in a tough spot. And so they get manipulated. They get played. There's a political naivety in some of these groups. Others, it's just, hey, we like a place at the table, and we get invited to the big fundraising donors, and so we're playing ball here, and that's a problem that needs to be exposed.
So this all seems so basic to me, gentlemen. We're saying equal rights protections just means I have this pro-life belief, and my pro-life belief goes something like this. From the moment of conception, there's a distinct living and whole human being. And therefore, there's no morally significant differences between the unborn child that I once was and the adult that I am today that would make it okay to kill me at that earlier stage. I'm pro-life, which means that the dignity and right to life of children in the womb is equal to that of any infant or toddler or teenager. That our rights don't come from our location, our dependency, or any of these things. And our position is that the child in the womb is indistinguishable in dignity and rights from an infant directly after birth. And so, guys, what we mean by equal rights protections is simply whatever would happen to parents who drowned their 1-month-old, their 2-week-old in the bathtub, a newborn. You drown that baby in the bathtub, or what? Maybe you pay your neighbor to do it. You pay someone else to drown your baby in the bathtub, or you do it yourself. All we're saying is that whatever would happen to someone in the position of killing infants directly after birth should be the same thing that happens when you kill an unborn baby after it's against the law. That's all we're saying. Yep. Oh, you want to hang women in the public square? Well, no, not really. No. I think that most women would obey the law. And so I ask a lot of post-abortive women, Jason and AJ, are gals, pro-life female warriors, friends of ours who have gone through healing and they're open about their abortion. I'll ask our friends, hey, I'm just curious. I want to ask you, when you got your abortion, if it had been illegal and there were consequences, would you have done it? Guys, every woman I've asked that to says, no way.
Yeah. We're not singling them out to prosecute them. We're protecting them by protecting their children, and we're protecting them from the underlying crime that they're going to hold with them for a lifetime of regret and guilt. Right. The other thing is too, like, just for fun, I went online and I thought, you know what? I wonder what the crime is for killing a dog in America. 7 years in jail, federal prison for killing a dog in America. Yet
wild.
0 punishments for killing humans. The pro-choice movement doesn't believe in the right to life. Therefore, they choose to kill babies. But the pro-life movement believes in the equal right to life for unborn children, but refuse to protect them. And this is moral insanity to me. And it can't be the end goal of our movement. And we have to get back to first principles, because without it, we have no movement. What means to be pro-life is that you should think, if nothing else, we should hold this kind of self-evident first principle that the unborn child is equally a member of the human family, has innate ontological rights that are just by virtue of it being human and made in the image of God. Therefore, the same rights that born people have, unborn people should have, especially the right to life. And so it just, to your point, Seth, this just seems like common, everyday, simple language that every single pro-life person, if you talk to people, pro-life people at the ground level, they will be like, what do you mean?
I'll give you an example of that. I was at a big church recently, and I got asked the question about the legal landscape after Dobbs and how do we protect babies? And I started explaining equal rights protection. And I could tell at first, because when I said, no, I'm including parents, I'm including mothers and fathers in like actually being punished if they get illegal abortions. And I could tell that the audience for a second was a little bit like, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then I gave my little explanation, and next thing I'm seeing this. I'm seeing nodding heads. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Oh well, yeah, I guess that's kind of consistent. Okay. Like this is actually not that difficult for the lay people and for the church, but, we probably shouldn't spend too much longer because we want people to listen to the whole conversation. But AJ, what is incrementalism then? Because that seems to be the dominating feature or strategy that's kind of represented the pro-life movement for some time now.
Yeah. So obviously, all manners of social reform are incremental.
Right.
It's an inescapable concept, right? And so it's not whether incremental legislation will be tried and enforced. It just depends on which one. And so it's inevitable that you're going to use incremental processes in social reform to give justice for children. It just depends on what type of incremental strategy that you think is justifiable. So, incrementalism is this death by 1,000 cuts, to where anything that is pro-life in name only, or anything that would either advance the cause or even give some type of extra protections is justifiable. And that can't be the standard, because right now we could just be, it's not actually doing the thing that we're trying to do, is actually prevent the cultural decay of America engrossed in bloodshed. But then also too, it's not protecting babies. So I mean, I think there's some obvious standards that should be imposed, that we should abide by, in reference to that should govern our like incremental processes. Like, one is this actually going to protect babies? Two, is this actually going to advance our cause in the long term, rather than hurt it? Other is like, is this truly the best we can get? Because this kind of bait and switch thing happens with a lot of pro-life legislators. Is they'll just say, okay, I think this is kind of what the GOP will abide by, or what they can maybe stomach, therefore I'll do it. Like, for instance, it was very popular in this last election cycle, like a 15-week federal ban on abortion, right? And it's like, okay, hold on here.
95% of all abortions are okay.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's something like 93% of all of the abortions that occur happen before 15 weeks. Yeah. And so you're doing this to pat yourself on the back, so that you can really show your donors, keep giving to us because we're winning. Right. But it's actually, one, it would prevent the work, because now you have this federal right against this very small subsection of late-term abortions that happen. But then that becomes the standard, right? Like, if you were to able to federally enshrine that would also mean that would take an incredible amount of federal work and leverage to undo and to give more protections to children. So you end up, it might be a victory by some stretch of the word, if you want to interpret it very grossly, to say that, we got to win. But you're shooting yourself in the foot in the long term, because now you have this huge hurdle if you want to protect babies before that point.
But your main point, AJ, is that a lot of Republican legislators look at the GOP and they say, what can we get away with? And what's the status quo in the GOP? Rather than saying, how can we shift the status quo of the GOP? If you don't like the cards you've been dealt, then re-deal the hand. Yeah. And part of the lesson of the moral majority, right, was that, like, we actually helped shift what the status quo was in the GOP and what those expectations were. Another example of culture downstream of politics, but politics also downstream of culture. This thing just goes both ways.
Absolutely.
I think that was your main primary point. People who call themselves incrementalists, I know a lot of good people who call themselves incrementalists, who also agree with us that we should have equal protections for the unborn. Mm-hmm. So, like, I don't want to get too, like, tied to terms. Yeah. So for those listening, some incremental victories are a really good thing. Like, if we could get a federal ban on all pornography under 18 right now, that would be a great thing. But you know what I really want? I think we should just completely ban all pornography.
Yeah.
I think it's great that we're banning chemical castration and sexual mutilation on minors. That's a great thing that's starting to happen. But I don't think anyone has the right to carve pieces off of their body
Yeah.
Or chemically castrate themselves just because they're 19 and they can make adult. No. Dude, if you went to a doctor and you're like, I feel, what's that word? Like someone who feels like they don't have any limbs.
Yeah.
I feel like a limbless person.
Yeah.
Hey, can you chop off my arms?
Yeah.
If a doctor did that to a 25-year-old, a 40-year-old, he should lose his license to practice medicine. I don't think that anyone should be able to do that, even if they're over 18. I believe the same thing about the transgender industry and surgeries. But wouldn't it be great to have a federal ban on all chemical castration and sexual mutilation of people under 18? I would love that step. That would be a good incremental victory.
Yeah.
But so incremental victories are inevitable.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't dictate your political philosophy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and the other point to hear, the kind of insider baseball in reference to this that people don't realize is incrementalism is actually the cloak that Republican leaders hide behind to actually not do what they should do. So in a lot of these conservative states, instead of outright ending abortion, they'll say for instance, let's say a state like, I don't know, Kansas is a bad example because you have state constitutional protections there. But like, let's say South Carolina, right? South Carolina has a heartbeat bill right now. So rather than end, the GOP is like, okay, if we do nothing, everybody's going to get mad at us, but I want to retain my seats. So what is the least amount of thing that I can do to keep everyone happy? So incrementalism actually becomes this excuse for not doing anything at all that would actually bring substantive rights back to the unborn child, instead of a process by which we actually do the most we can do.
Well,
right?
What you're describing, AJ, we have a term for it. It's called controlled opposition.
Yeah,
that's all you're saying. And so Jason, this is why you say let's get victories, but let's ask ourselves, is this the best we can get?
Yes.
Right. So, okay. So that's helpful.
I think that's a moral obligation. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be the moral obligation.
So this is incrementalism.
Real quick, Seth, this is why people ask me, shouldn't we just be really fighting for heartbeat bills? And look, in some junction, I can imagine some crazy scenario where like a state like New York, if we were able to pass a heartbeat bill, would I vote for it? Sure. But the practical reality of this is that's not how it works at all. Like, if you have the votes to get a heartbeat bill, you have the votes to get a life at conception bill with exceptions. So the principles of the matter of incrementalism might technically be justifiable, but the question is it practical? So most of the times these incrementalism is used to actually delay the abolition of abortion rather than get abolition, rather than actually just abolish abortion at all. So I think that's very important when we for pro-life voters, people listening to this call, to realize that in states, the conservative states that have heartbeat bills right now, there are a number of practical reasons why they're not good. One, they keep, if you have a 10-week bill in a state, you should be fighting for a life at conception bill because it'll close the clinics down at least.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to pat yourself on the back saying we passed a heartbeat bill, just know that at the end of the day, it's probably not going to save a lot of babies, because a heartbeat bill is contingent upon, in actuality, the abortionist enforcing it. To where a woman goes in, gets an ultrasound for gestational age, and you're trusting that the abortionist is going to correctly, the one who is financially incentivized to kill this child,
right,
to be truthful in actuality as to what the gestational age, I don't see a heartbeat here. That's what happens. And so, I think we should truly be fighting. If it's the most we can get, we should not only be fighting for that, but actually we should be raising all kinds of hell at the state level, at the local district level, especially now that we have this post-Roe America where all politics is local.
Right.
This is the rallying cry of the White Rose right now, is It is you guys. We are not the resistance. We are just the ones that are mobilizing you as the resistance, because you would be surprised at how much leverage and power at the local level in your local districts you have over the votes of your House representatives in this measure. We should be calling for our principles, first principles, to be abided by in the abolition and freedom and protection of all human beings. Yeah. So that's the nuts and bolts of how this works out.
And that's why that's why White Rose is so focused on the church. That's why everyone's trying to wake up, mobilize, educate, mobilize, inspire. Jason, in the last few minutes we have here together, I do want to talk about abolitionism. Okay. I mean, most of these folks really don't like me. I'm not entirely sure why, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm trying to figure it out. We don't need to belabor that too much. I mean, they'll watch this and they're already blowing up the YouTube comments at this point. Call it whatever. I'm just used to it. But I'm like, I agree with you. Equal rights protection. Okay. But you ran in these circles even in its early years. As the abolitionist kind of movement and title and branding was developing, you were running with those people. You were doing life with those people. You had those people over for dinner. I mean, you did ministry with those people. But then a lot of them have actually turned on you. You've told me some stories about how they attack you now. And so we've sufficiently warned people about the pro-life establishment. We could do more stories, I'm sure, right? And examples of pro-life organizations that, like, there was an example in North Dakota where they said, don't pass this equal rights protection bill. I'm sure there's more and more and more. But I don't want to just bash one side. We should be wary of bad strategies and bad ideas anywhere we see them, regardless of what they're called. But the abolitionists have done so much damage to that term. And they won't like to hear this, but Jason, when you and me try to work with people to mobilize them for equal rights protection, churches, pastors, organizations, activists, what's happened to us before? When they go, are you an abolitionist? Are you with the abolitionists? And if you say yes, the conversation's over. They won't even work with you if they learn that, even though they might agree with you on the first principle. It's like, whoa. So what is abolitionism? They've identified flaws with the pro-life establishment that we're like, yeah, that's bad, right? But can you help the viewers and the listeners understand this divide from those who say they want to protect the preborn?
Yeah, man, big question. I'll try to run through briefly. You and I did a show on this last year. And
we did. People can go back.
We didn't really get into the ideology. We really just talked about the bad behavior of some abolitionists, and that's a huge problem. For the record, Seth, we can just say it, right? You support bills of equal protection. Is that true?
That's right. Amen. Everywhere.
Yes, you do. Yeah. And you're sending, White Rose is sending AJ to Texas next week to testify on behalf and support of the Texas bill, their equal protection bill. So just for the record, for all those abolitionists, Seth Gruber definitely supports bills of equal protection. You've been with me, and AJ's been with me in multiple states, and as I said, we've submitted the equal protection statement in multiple state legislatures, and we'll be continuing to build that out, and that's a national statement on equal protection, and submitting that to legislators. So, I was there from the beginning with the abolition, not the beginning, but the abolitionist movement, was sort of an outgrowth of the personhood movement. Started in Oklahoma, the guys involved there, Norman, Oklahoma, they were Personhood Oklahoma for a short season, and then became Abolish Human Abortion. And that group really blew up. There was a whole fiasco. The core group there split. Half the group went woke. And, some of the people that were being platformed and were leaders have gone full off the rails. Some are not even Christians. Some, full-blown lesbians. Was a lot of stuff, right? And so it's been a movement that has been characterized by strife and division and discord as much as it's been characterized by principled, courageous, bold confrontation of our gross national sin, the murder of little babies in the womb. So, there's a lot that I love about the abolitionist movement. There's a lot of very good abolitionists. So for those who are like, oh, you cringe at that, which I have a lot of guys, and I know for you, AJ and Seth, like a lot of abolitionists are going to say, well, the whole reason you guys are even doing this show and are even promoting equal protection is because we steel-balled you. We prodded you into it. And the reality is, no. Actually, what you folks have been doing that have been attacking Seth, calling him a pimp, calling him a phony and a fake, and calling AJ, he's got blood on his hands because he's a filthy, sinful incrementalist and all this stuff. You have been actually delaying the conversion of a whole lot of people to these principles of equal protection.
Right.
Because the biggest thing that I hear, and I heard this from you guys, was like, Jason, I'm with you. When we talked about this a couple of years ago, it was like, dude, totally with you on these principles. That's what we want. But dude, I am not going to associate with some of these people.
Yeah, Brian Ottinger from Love Life, like 4 years ago, said, Seth, I want you to meet this guy named Jason. He's a really good guy. You'd like him. And I was like, nope. because I thought you were, the same mold,
Yeah.
And it's funny, Jason, because like sorry, 1 second. I've said from stages since like 15, that there's nothing wrong with a bill that says if you kill innocent human beings, there are penalties for killing innocent human beings. John Speed and T. Russell Hunter and that punk named Sam or whatever, that's like the biggest slanderer I've ever met in the church. They're never going to go find those recordings and talks. But I've said that for years. But I did buy the line that like it might lead to civil war if a governor, like in 2015, 2016, 2017, I believe that. I thought that like if a governor signed an abolition bill, that criminalized it would lead to civil war, and the deep state in DC would come and start just shooting police officers in Oklahoma because they were flouting Roe v. Wade. And I was like, I wasn't sure if that was the best approach, but I didn't disagree with the fact that there should be equal protections for the unborn. I never disagreed with that. But I didn't know if I wanted to meet you 4 or 5 years ago because I was like, is he part of that? So just to kind of unfortunately validate what you're saying.
Yeah. So I think a lot of abolitionists don't realize how bad some of their behavior can be and the damage that they do to the movement. And this is not something that's unique to the abolitionist movement. I think there is a real spirit sort of self-righteousness that I alluded to. There's like a real hypercritical, hyper self-righteous spirit, and it's the danger of being an ideologue, right? And if you truncate your ethical system and your understanding of moral reasoning and moral decision making down to just a pure ideology, I'm this principled ideologue, right? Without any consideration for the consequences of actions or the character of individuals, you're gonna have a very misguided view of biblical ethics.
Yeah.
And you're going to do a lot of damage to the body of Christ. And there has been, things like, saying that you have to stop using the term pro-life. And this is where I always butted heads with the guys in Oklahoma. And, because I wouldn't stop calling myself a pro-lifer. They always get mad at me. And I would always be correcting the abolitionist movement for a lot of hubris. And saying, brothers, look, this movement's not going to get any more successful than to the degree to which we clothe ourselves in humility. And we have to be mature, godly people. And so the problem is not so much even just with the abolitionist movement per se. This is just indicative of young, aggressive, like young, restless, reformed crowd, the young Christian nationalists. You see this social media culture. You get a lot of young men who get all fired up and zealous.
Right.
And some of these people that are rebuking you, Seth, some of these people have only been in this fight for a year or two. It's like, and now they're suddenly experts because they watched a few lectures, did a few things, and now they feel like, and social media gives them a platform. So they now have this platform and they have this stage where they can just vomit on people. They've got what they think is the sword of the spirit, but it's really just a blunt, dull, unsharpened, unrefined bat that they're swinging around, clubbing their brothers and sisters in Christ, engaging in Corinthian-like behavior that Paul says, are you not babes in Christ, that you behave in this childish manner, that there is this kind of division and strife that I am of Apollos, I am of Paul, I am of Norman, Oklahoma. It is such an ungodly self-righteousness that Paul rebukes and says, I can't even feed you with meat because you can't even absorb the milk. You Corinthians, you're out of order. And so, there needs to be some real order brought. And so a lot of guys that are abolitionists in principle don't even use the term really, or hesitate to use the term, or use it carefully because they don't want to associate that. Guys like Jeff Durbin, right? Guys like the guys we talked about, Virgil Walker in Georgia, other folks like that, hey, they're principally this is what they're fighting for.
Uh-huh.
But man, they have given some strong public rebukes. So what you really have is this split in the abolitionist movement. And so the Southern Poverty Law Center, they did an article about the abolitionist movement last year, and they mentioned us, Operation Save America. They mentioned 4 organizations that are leading the charge of the abolitionist movement that is changing the culture. Praise God. And End Abortion Now, Jeff Durbin's group was one. Foundation to Abolish Abortion, our friend Bradley Pierce was one. Operation Save America, we were one listed, and they mentioned me. And then they mentioned the folks in Norman, Oklahoma, that is no longer Free the States. It's now Abolitionists Rising. And so these 4 groups were said to be the leaders of the abolitionist movement. NBC News did a hit piece on me last year where they called me the tip of the spear of the abolitionist movement and of the pro-life movement. So, I've been very deeply embedded in this movement. We've been fighting for these principles. These people attack me and say I'm anti-abolition. I'm not anti-abolition. I'm anti-being a jerk. I'm anti not behaving like a Christian. And, and so as much as we want to draw distinctions between compromised pro-life, unjust bills and principled biblical godly thinking.
Yeah.
We also have to draw proper distinctions between good godly men who still call themselves pro-life and the fakes. And so the abolitionist movement too often, and this is really this split between the guys in Norman, and they have what they call the Norman statement. So you really have the Norman abolitionists, and then you have people like me that I'd say is like a Christian abolitionist, right? Like we try to be Christians, and I'm pro-life. I'm a Christian. I'm an abolitionist. Whatever term, okay, I can identify with that. Like you talked about incremental. Like we operate incrementally. These terms all have strengths and weaknesses to them. They all need nuance and definition.
Right.
But the abolitionist movement, as it has centered in Norman, Oklahoma, it has been so aggressively broad brushing the pro-life movement that they've turned away a lot of would-be allies.
Amen.
By just really immature, youthful, slanderous behavior. And so what they're doing to you right now, Seth, is what they've done to me. They have these private threads. They have these little private groups where they're in their little groups and they all banter about people.
They're fast, too. They're fast.
And like you mentioned, Sam Riley's one of these guys. Sam Riley will get in there and he'll weaponize them and say, oh, this is the person. Seth Gruber is an enemy of abolition. He won't put our jersey on. He won't say, I am of Apollos. He won't get on our team. And so they'll sick them on. They'll sick the group like hyenas, like Saul Alinsky type tactics. And they'll all get on your social media and pretend it's some sort of organic thing when it's really just an orchestrated thing.
Yeah.
They're orchestrating this in these little threads to make themselves appear bigger than they are.
Sometimes, Jason, and we really got to land the plane here, but sometimes, Jason, I do wonder if some of these folks actually even want to work together, or if they're hoping we say no so that they can get the headline. So I hesitated on whether to say this or not, but because I know that your old friends, Jason, will listen to this, let me just say this. We want to have equal rights protections and want to work with people to do that. So for the folks who have been saying Seth doesn't support abolition in Kansas, dude, hey, guys over there at the group in Kansas, we've emailed you 5 times now, and we've asked to meet with you to strategize and build coalitions, and you won't give AJ a time on when you'd like to meet with us. Okay, so for all the slanderous libel, why don't you prove that you're not just in this for slanderous libel? And why don't you respond to the stinking email? Because White Rose does want to protect every unborn child. And sometimes it feels like they actually get off on the disagreements with people that they probably could build coalitions with. But anyways, Jason, take us home.
Yeah, I could summarize that in just one simple statement is to say abolitionists are critical of any bill that's not total abolition because they say it's not perfect biblical justice, which is what we have to do. But an abolitionist bill doesn't give us perfect biblical justice because we have a justice system that right now has all kinds of levels of injustice built into it, from our penal system to transgender judges to you name it on down the line. We're working within a flawed system. We're trying to minimize the injustices all around us and doing the best we can. And so to simply condemn another bill or condemn a pro-life organization or group because they are advocating for a bill that falls short of perfect biblical justice, they're hoisting on their own petard there, as they say. So nobody's establishing perfect biblical justice. Now, that being said, I do think the biblical standard, what we should hope for and strive for and work for is is equal protection. It's a good, clear line in the sand that we're eliminating the inequity, the unequal treatment of preborn children. And so, as AJ said, that's one of the problems with the abolitionist movement. But I'd like to extend an olive branch to the abolitionist guys there in Norman and say, hey, we should be able to work on the same team. We call Christ King, we call him Lord. We seek to do his will and establish biblical justice. We seek to end and criminalize the killing of babies. Stop attacking us. Okay, let's keep barrels pointed downrange, and we won't have to make videos responding to your attacks against us. Okay, we would love to be able to work together. We'd love to be able to have a beautiful unity standing on these principles of equal protection and the lordship of Christ, and proclaiming he is king, and all authority in heaven and earth has been given to him. Amen. And so let's be the church. Let's wake the church up to do her duty to establish justice. The last thing I'll say is a small critique again of the abolitionist movement. As an example of some of this rhetoric, abolitionists will say that a problem with somebody like you, Seth, or AJ, is that you've not established justice. The pro-life movement has not established justice. We got criticized by these guys because we put forward an amendment to the state budget in South Carolina a couple years ago, where we had an equal protection bill. It got killed in committee. The budget comes out, and we put forward, our legislator friend Jonathan Hill put forward a strike to the amendment to strike the funding for Planned Parenthood. Great thing to do. Why would we not want to cut the funding for Planned Parenthood? We'd love to put them all in jail as murderers and sexual perverts and predators, but we don't have the political power to do that right now. We can call for that, and we should, and we do. But in the meantime, yes, let's defund them. Why would we not want to defund it? Well, the guys in Norman, Oklahoma attacked us and said we were compromised incrementalists, and that we were perpetuating the bloodshed and so forth. And one of the criticisms that they said was they had this line that they put on social media where they said, "We're not commanded to defund the high places. We're commanded to tear them down." And that's powerful rhetoric. That sounded really good. That'll preach, right? But of course, the problem is the guy that said that. I could ask him, well, what high places have you torn down?
Yeah.
Ask the guys in Norman, Oklahoma, what high places have you torn down? Show me where you've established justice. They say, well, your incremental bills don't establish justice. Yeah, but you haven't established justice either. So your actions have not established justice any more than my actions or the actions of other pro-lifers have established justice. To criticize me and say my actions don't establish justice, therefore they're wrong, when your actions are not establishing justice, then by that standard, they are equally wrong. And so this is a form of self-righteousness, right? This is what blind ideology does. We can prop ourselves up, but taking the right ideological position is not the same thing as actually establishing justice and doing justice.
Wow.
And that's a process. Yeah. Right? We're in a corrupt, unjust system, and we're all trying to do the best we can to fight these evils, fight these injustices, and establish truth and righteousness. And that's a bloody, dirty mess. And so I would just plead with my abolitionist brethren, stop attacking on a moral high horse good, godly men and women that are fighting this battle. May not be fighting it exactly the way that you do. Allow for some areas of disagreement. It's not the Seth Grubers and AJ Hurleys that are keeping abortion legal in this country. If you think that, you are a part of a cult and you're deluded. Okay, it is. We need a lot more Seth Grubers and AJ Hurleys and people that will stand up and decry the evil of abortion, call it murder, stand upon biblical principles, stand in the power of the Holy Spirit to fight this. And
that's it, Jason. Right? Ultimately, it's the church. We have to make the local church great again. Those are the hats we should make. Make the local church great again. Well, guys, we gotta end the conversation. This guy's so helpful. AJ, Jason, thank you so much. Listen, guys, in summary, babies in the womb have the same rights and dignity as babies outside the womb directly after birth or any other time. Therefore, they deserve the same levels of legal protection. And the only way that they can have the same level of legal protection is that anyone who's involved in killing them after it's against the law have to have the same kind of penalties that you would have if you killed an infant. That shouldn't be controversial. In fact, that's sort of just a political extrapolation of the pro-life ideology. That's really all it is. But hopefully the defining of terms, the laying the groundwork of the battlefield and the pitfalls was helpful for people. I love you, brothers. Super grateful for you guys. Thanks for doing the hard work on the ground that so many people are unwilling to do to actually shift and change the culture and wake up the church. And we'll see you guys out there on the battlefield.